Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Being Witch in Modern Times with Sarah Wu, curator, facilitator, and Village Witch. villagewitch.org. You can learn more about her. Welcome, Sarah. Oh, I think she's frozen. Sarah, are you available? Well, while we're waiting for Sarah to come back, I'm Charissa Sims, live event host for Humanities Team, a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to make conscious living prevalent worldwide by 2040. And I'm coming to you live from Lafayette, Colorado. Welcome, Sarah.
Welcome. Thank you. Hi, everyone watching. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yes, yes. So I'm hoping that what we see on the screen isn't what other people are seeing. Jim and Garth are okay. Our heads are cut off and doing interesting things in the windows. So there.
Sure,
So,
Jim's working on it.
okay, wonderful. I also want to welcome Sarah Wu's audience, those streaming live through the Humanities Team Facebook page, Humanities Team YouTube channel, and Stream Plus members that are here in the green room with us. Welcome. And I want to do a special shout out to the Sign Network with John and Summer Raymer at sign.network. Because it is a live program, we will have time for comments and questions. And try to get your question into Sarah, the Village Witch, within the first 30 to 40 minutes of the program. You can post it in the chat wherever you're watching. So let me share a little bit more about Sarah. Sarah Wu is a passionate educational curator, facilitator, mentor, community, and clinical herbalist, a representative for Mother Nature as a writer and teacher of deep ecology, spiritual ecology, and whole systems design shared through the lens of herbalism, permaculture, archetypal symbolism, tarot, and astrology. So happy to be with you here today, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me once again. I appreciate all your time.
Oh, yes. It's great to highlight everything that you're doing as a village witch. And what does it mean to be a modern witch?
Thank you. Yeah, I just jump right in. Well, it's interesting because I've noticed, and I really love this, and for some of you maybe who've gotten a chance to catch the Being Witch talks that are on humanities team, is that the rise of, or this renaissance or this rebirth is happening right now for people who practice a spiritual path that goes a little bit more back into, not even a little bit, like very much back into the animistic world. And that's the big part about identifying as witch, is that there's really no intercessor, there's no one path. There's many different paths that bring us to our spirituality, and a lot of it is connected through our relationship with nature, in particular plants, animals, cosmos, soil, and other humans. And then some witches also maybe will have certain skills of mediumship or connecting with entities unseen, and as how they exist in countless other realms in our existence here in our universe. So it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For me, one of my identities that I was sharing with you earlier with the village witch means, and I'm an herbalist, so it means that I do a lot of, and not all herbalists identify as witches. It's very important to also clarify. But I work with the plants, and I work with the plants on all different levels, from the clinical level, which means, I'm going really deep with people into their personal health journeys, and it's dealing with all layers of the body, the emotional body, the mental body, the physical body, spiritual body. And we're helping them to create practices as well as protocols that are really going to help them bring into balance. But then as a community herbalist, I get there's a lot of children and kids, children are sweet, kids are kind of dirty and gross. And so, I get a lot of calls from parents all the time, like, what is this? Can you help me with this? And I have an apothecary that I dispense from. And then I also help people, with in terms of like the village witchery is, doing cleanses on their houses. And there's a lot of transients here in Costa Rica where I live. And so people are often looking for help in like, yeah, cleaning energetically their homes or, creating like a space in their house that feels fresh for them to come into. I've also facilitated like cord cuttings, when people are going through breakups or separations. And I get called on for different things. I also host some seasonal celebrations. I really have a solstice celebration at my house every year for the winter solstice. And, so it's like the village witch and the modern witch kind of looks like that, where it's just bringing wise woman practices back into everyday experiences.
That's wonderful. So when people are sending you pictures of their rashes and things, are you doing remote work? Are they texting you this? And then are you telling them what to go buy or what plants to use in their community or sending it to them? How does that work?
All of it, like sometimes people will come visit me at my house. Once in a while I'll do a home visit if someone really needs a home visit for different reasons why they can't leave their house. But definitely, lots of texting from moms. They're just so busy and it's hard for them to always get their children, just getting them up and fed into school sometimes is enough for the day. And so a lot of times moms will write me like, I need the support, and I'll tell them what to buy, or if I have, I'll dispense and we'll meet up, or or I'll send them to the store, I'll send them links. It depends, it's all of it. I really like to have a lot of flexibility with people. It's that whole concept of meeting people where they're at. And it's like not everyone can come for an hour, 2 hours to sit and deal, especially when mothers have little children or multiple children. It gets even harder.
Yes. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. And it's so amazing that they reach out to you, that they trust you. I mean, because of your background and expertise as an herbalist, and you're so deeply connected to nature. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And, it's, I've been in practice with herbal medicine and always a student, always a student for 25 years, and so it's definitely street credibility and practice, which helps. And so live where I live, where it is very transient, people come in and they ask like who can help with certain things, because I'm very not only experienced in clinical realm, but also in, my ecosystem. Like I really know what's here. I've lived in this country for a very long time. So it's also helping people to acculturate when they just don't know where to get certain things yet, So it's also just answering people's questions on where to buy their herbs or where to buy their supplements or different things that they for their household and family.
Oh, that makes sense. How long have you lived in Costa Rica?
I've been here 15 years.
Oh, that's incredible. That's
Yeah, it
wonderful.
is. I absolutely love it.
I have a question from our audience.
Mhm.
Do you need any licensing to practice in Costa Rica? People run into practicing medicine without a license in the US. Well,
Yes,
herbalism is not technically medicine, correct?
it's the oldest medicine,
It's the
actually.
oldest medicine,
It
but
is traditional medicine. Yes.
traditional medicine.
So the medicine that's being practiced nowadays has only been around about 100 years, right? Like the
Mhm.
founding of the American Medical Association, for example, was in the early 1900s. Before that, there's actually a lot of other schools of medicine, but
Yeah,
looking at it,
homeopathics and other.
oh yeah, the American eclectics, there were many different schools. And so, and it was, uh, there was a lot of investment into one path, right? And
Right.
so before I even get into the licensing comment, so it's a really good comment,
Yes.
is that I want to just kind of break apart like the concepts of East and West first,
Okay,
because people
thank you.
use language like East and West when talking about natural medicine, which is it's a very colonial perspective based on England being the center of the world.
Limited
It's
perspective,
very
right?
limited, correct. And very colonistic, actually, because it was England that started that pretty much, which says, okay, the zero, Greenwich Mountain Time, and then everything this way and everything that way. So it's a form of like breaking apart certain thought systems. And East, when we talk about that, and is in terms of natural medicine or a more spiritual way of living, it disregards all the people from North, South, and Central America who are also deep in their spiritual practice, not through a Judeo-Christian or an Abrahamic lens, very much through, working with plants and holistic perspectives. So it's important to use language like reductionist medicine or allopathic medicine, which is treating a disease with a pharmaceutical, right? And we know that this is amazing in terms of emergency care. We know in terms of like folks like type 1 diabetics, for example, herbalism can't help them. They would have died, like more than 100 years ago. Those people would not have survived, usually past being a teenager. And so it's like the allopathic medicine is so great for that. But in terms of really treating whole people and not just treating diseases and looking at people as very, very complicated, lots of layers, lots of different roots. Like this is where
looking at the source.
Exactly. Source, and for again, source care, what we call like constitutional medicine, as well as, preventative, and really helping, through the aging process. It's like in the timeline of our lives, it's like we do get older and older every day, and we experience and we different levels of traumas, from twisting your ankle to car accidents to death in the family to what you see on the news, and so we're never actually fully healed. It's like healed is not it's not an achievement. It's just something.
It's a journey.
It's a journey, exactly. And so just to come back to the question about licensing, herbalism in particular is licensed in certain countries, like in the EU, for example, in Germany and Switzerland, it will be licensed to practice. Most herbalists do not believe in that in particular, because it's a system of power and control that capitalizes the practice and really removes it from communities. With that, there are people out there who, especially I see this in Costa Rica a lot, especially with shamanic tourism and all these people uninitiated attempting to initiate people, is that you do see some people.
That's horrifying. I'm sorry.
It is. No, it is. But you do see people practicing in ways that are very, very much based in like the ego and everything.
Yes.
And so it's important for people who work in herbalism to really hold ourselves accountable as a community. And the herbalism community is very, very tight. And everyone kind of knows who everybody is, especially when they're teachers or when they're practitioners out there. And it's like your reputation is everything, And one of the things that I teach my students so much is about ethics and scope of practice, and that there's absolutely no faking it till you make it. Even to call yourself an herbalist, like with a capital H, I suppose, our community believes it's 10,000 hours of practice, which, is a lot. And so, but we don't want to fall under certain like degrees or power bodies that tell us to practice or not. And then, and that's very much from a global North perspective. In the global South, which, what used to be called like third world countries or whatever, everything that's not, Western Europe, United States, is kind of like the rest of the world. The World Health Organization protects people who are practicing traditional medicine, because over 80% of the world does still actually turn to plants first as their medicine, because they are creatures that we've co-evolved with. Our bodies respond to the plants in a way that's much different from, reductionist pharmaceutical medicine, which much of which is actually derived from plants,
right.
But reducing them down to just one chemical, where a plant or a mushroom has so many different chemical constituents that it really takes a lot of practice and study to understand the chemistry of these plants. And so herbalism is a science, which is botany and biology and anatomy and physiology and pathophysiology and understanding chemistry. And herb drug interactions is a really big one right now. I work with a lot of people trying to come off of different types of antidepressants, and we have to be mindful because herbs are very powerful and they're metabolized via similar pathways as certain pharmaceuticals are, and so they can affect them. And luckily we have more and more information about this because so many people are interested that there's more and more studies being done. So then it's a science, it's an art, and the art is really understanding patterns, right? And we could look at this through the Ayurvedic perspective, through the Chinese perspective, through the elemental, like the Greek humors, and how we're talking about the body, but it's all the same. It's just different lexicon, right? Looking at the pattern though of the human and what they need and how they, it's like you and I sitting here, we could both say maybe perhaps we identify as women, maybe we both, have certain genetic profiles that would make us women, but it doesn't mean we communicate, we digest, we learn, we sleep, we love, we process, like even where the physical bone structure where the fat sits on our body is slightly different, and so we do treat people as unique individuals. And this is the difference from allopathic medicine, which creates a blanket statement, one pill for that, one pill for that, and it doesn't take the time to go into the depth. It's incredible when it comes to terms of like, studies on the blood or urine analysis, or you need an MRI, or you're talking to a cardiologist.
The testing is really
correct.
important.
And so as an herbalist, I actually receive blood a lot of times or I tell them, okay, you need to see this type of specialist, come back to me and let's look at those results are, because that is one of our limitations, is that we're not in necessarily, we can do assessments, but we're not doing diagnostics at that level because we, we're not working in, some of us are, herbalists are working in labs or working in clinics or working in hospitals, and globally there's a lot of herbalists in hospitals, so I don't look, I'm not a US centric perspective on this practice. I'm a global citizen. I work with people from all over the world, and I don't live in the US, for a very long time. So I don't really associate much with what's happening there. But for herbalism, actually, the herbalist community in the United States is one of the strongest in the world. And it's actually really amazing that we aren't regulated, because it has led to just so much blossoming of the community and really amazing teachers and clinicians out there who are, bringing the practice back to people who really were oppressed for a very long time,
Yeah. Do you feel that the US is going that route, that maybe it will be regulated in the future? I know there's been talk about supplements and maybe herbs.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, right? Because I think yes and no. There's potential for it. There's some potential for it. I do, like with the FDA and everything, what the hard thing is they can't patent plants unless they genetically modify them, right? And so genetically modified plants can be patented, but no herbalist would touch a genetically modified plant for medicine. And they're not evil plants, but a lot of times they're genetically modified to resist chemical exposure, right? Call it Roundup Ready seeds. And so, like, I don't think that the energy will be put into medicine plants like that. Although what we do see are, the extraction of certain chemicals from the plants, from the mushrooms. And you can see this on the shelf in the health food store where it might say standardized. So it'll be the plant extract with a certain percentage of a plant constituent within that formula. So you'll see that kind of stuff. You'll see like phytopharmaceuticals popping up, or what we call nutraceuticals. The really
Yeah.
hard thing, though, and this is where people need to be very aware and dive deep into their company and not just kind of, purchase what looks good, is that there's a lot of adulteration on the market. Adulteration meaning people are selling, certain companies are selling plants, which, or supplements in particular, like capsules,
Mm-hmm.
don't even contain what they say they do. So
Oh, okay.
that's the risk. And this actually does a lot of harm to herbalists themselves. And so this is why it's really important, I believe, for people to learn their bioregion, to take time with plant walkers, who are out there, educating you about your backyard and your forests and what's in your parks, and learning that way, doing your research and really diving into the companies. Like, where are they sourcing? If they don't say anything about sourcing on their website, find a different one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Something
because
suspicious about it.
yeah, something suspicious about it. For me, there's an ethical consideration as well. If they're not letting you know what it is, or if they're just ready, in cottage herbalism, like at the farmer's market, probably won't have, and they might, the Latin name and the common name, but a lot of times if you're buying supplements, they should be able to provide also the Latin or the scientific binomial, which is going to help you to identify, a much clearer what the plant is, because the plants have a lot of different common names. It's just like we have our little pet names and these types of things. So I'm the same person with like 5 different names. The same thing with the plants, and so
Yeah.
it is important to learn their binomials.
Oh, interesting.
Mhm.
So we have a comment. She said, "Thank you for your comprehensive answer." And I agree. I'm so
You're
glad you
welcome.
asked that question because it took us down like a little rabbit hole that I loved, and it was great. And do you feel that being a witch is more accepted today, or do you feel like some people are still doing it in secret and hiding, or maybe just don't call themselves witches?
Both. I think it's both. I mean, you look in social media and you see there's so many people practicing right now and putting information out there and sharing, and some of it's just
Hmm.
parroted, and some of it is coming from experience. In certain countries, of course, we have more freedom of expression. In certain countries, women are very, and I'm saying this, it is all genders participate, but it would be more oppressive in other countries. Of course, it depends on where you are. It also depends on where you live. Like if you're living somewhere that perhaps is very much associated with a certain religion, or, that's like kind of the foundation of the community, people would be practicing more personally, because they might not feel welcomed, or they might not feel accepted, or they would feel like they would get picked on or bullied. So I think that the answer to that is it depends. Yes,
Mm,
and
right. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Well,
But
we have
online, there's a lot. I mean, I've go ahead.
online. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, no, but even in person, like even here, like in Latin America, for example, people are very connected. Like that, it is a very Catholicism is, the national religions of many of the
Mhm.
countries. But then, for example, you go into places like Cuba, which I had the great opportunity to visit back in 2013, is they practice a really unique form of Christianity called Santeria, and it's
Oh,
just
I've never heard
out
of
there.
that.
It's beautiful. Like their Santeria is where they kind of blend, the Yoruban, West African, and the Taino gods and goddesses with the Christian saints. And so they're praying a lot to the saints, and it's beautiful. And they have a lot of images of, the Black Madonna and these altars everywhere. There are these hybrids, of the religion that was introduced, through colonization, as well as their native religions, as well as the religion of the enslaved peoples as they came into the Caribbean. And so you see a lot of different kind of mixes around, and it kind of depends on the country. I work in Guatemala a lot, that has very, very much been influenced specifically by, Catholicism, but evangelical um,
Yes.
denominations. And but
Right.
but
Well,
there's
they
still
come in and they try to convert
missionary,
communities,
right? But the
missionary.
people like the Mayan culture though is so strong,
Yeah.
and they're not giving up their culture for that. And so you also see a lot of
Yay.
hybridizing, of the religion with the Mayan or with their indigenous cultures. And so I think that, spirituality is so fluid, and it really just depends on where you are in the world, and what people are exposed to, and what they feel called to. And then of course, like on the bigger systematic, like certain governments are more fluid than others as well. And we see very, very conservative, strict ones, of course, and we see ones that are a little bit more open. At least in practice, maybe not always in, like the philosophy that they put out there to the world, but they are lenient or more strict with people. It's kind of like what we see with a lot of like the feminist movement, for example, in Iran the last few years. Like it was really like the morality police actually going around and making sure that everything's all tight, and that women are very much, oppressed. And that's a new thing for that culture. It's only the last few decades where that has really been imposed upon them, into the late 70s, early 80s. And before that, they had a much different spirituality, and my Persian friends that I know, whose parents, were always like, okay, this is how we behave at home, this is how we behave in public. And it was always a little confusion actually between, how we express ourselves via our spirituality. And so I think there's and I actually have a lot of like Persian female students actually.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and they bring really beautiful, indigenous practices that are not rooted in the religion of their state, and it's really lovely to see, especially they're outside of their state or their country, and so they're able to do that. Where we're in it, they can't. So there's a lot to be considered with that idea and that conversation.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I love what you were saying about the blending, where they're incorporating indigenous practices, but also Catholicism. And it's just like, it doesn't have to be so black and white, so one or the
Mhm.
other. And that really warms my heart. So it doesn't have to be so rigid. So that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I agree with that. I
Hmm.
always, I really believe in meditating on the gray zone, because it's like with the black and white and just right, that's polarization or that's division, and I'm so gray, I'm so easily able to see other perspectives, that I really think it's important that when we're feeling like a really strong feeling or perspective, how do we walk in another's shoes, is like, well, what is in between these two ideas, because
Mm.
they're a truth for both people, but what there's other in that gap in between them, there's also so many other truths that exist. And I think this is where we actually come into, empathy and compassion, and really acknowledging, that there are layers to be explored.
Yes, yes, that makes sense. Well, we have another question. This is an interesting comment and question. Rosa asks, I love to practice such kind of medicine. Is there any herbal treatment for cancer?
I'm not even going to answer that question because um, it's so big, and
Yeah, I
it
know.
depends.
I had
Yeah,
cancer, so I know how
yeah,
big it is. Yes.
yeah, and it depends on the person. It depends on what type, how far
Yeah.
along they are, and then we have to go deep into diet and environment and accessibility and exposure and family history and genetics. And I'm sorry, I can't answer that question because it's too big for a podcast like this, and
Yeah.
it's also not appropriate for me to answer that in this.
Yeah, in this format. That would
In
be
this format,
something
yeah.
private, and maybe she can reach out to you
She could. Yeah, she could.
on
I do consultations, and yeah, of course.
consultations.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
if it was something I felt I could handle, I would say yes, and if it's something not, I would say no. There is, there's a herbalist. His name is Donnie Yentz, Yantz, and he is
Yes.
an herbalist that works extensively with integration of things like chemo with supplements and herbs as well. So he would be a professional to also consider reaching out to, that has a lot of experience in that realm.
Yes, I did his protocols when I
Nice.
was diagnosed. So yes, I'm familiar with him. Well, would you share your own journey to discovering the beautiful and wise witch within?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I think like as a child, I had a lot of different experiences. In terms of mediumship, I I definitely had a lot of different like ghost encounters as a child. Still now I can feel when they're close by, or if
Mhm.
or if not.
You see them or you just sense them?
It's a sensing,
Yeah,
sometimes the
I get
shadows,
that too. Yeah.
or the and dream time. Like I'm very,
Mhm.
very attached, and or not very attached, I'm very like, my dreams are very intense and very lucid, and often come into different types of reality, which is kind of crazy when it happens, where I'll be like going, and just simple things of handing someone a box. I'm like, I did that in a dream. I don't even remember when,
So it was a
so
prophetic dream. You
yeah, and they're never like major prophecy, but I'm living in other realities at the same time,
yes.
I guess, or timelines, right? Um, However we'd say it. And then for me, as a child, I am so lucky to have been probably the last generation that really played outside. I was born in the early 80s. And so, a lot of
Yeah,
children,
me too. We played outside.
yeah, a lot of children now don't have that
Hmm.
as much, life is a little different for them now. And so, like having so much outdoor time really connected me to nature in a really beautiful way. And I used to like make like little green man masks,
Oh,
and
how fun.
you don't even know what you're doing, but like tapping into ancient animistic deities, and and I always felt also very defiant against systems that, whether it was like the church systems or the school systems. And I always felt that there were things off. And that's a big path actually of which is a defiance of the systems that are causing harm, because there have been so many. There are
Mm.
still so many, that really seek to control and tell people how to be. And so that always was very present for me, and very it was something I never felt right about. And in terms of like identifying as witch, I think it was something I was always really curious about and called to. Um,
Oh,
you
had you
know,
heard about it
yeah,
from?
yeah. Like would start reading about it young, but it was actually like my sister came home from camp one year with like this a symbol of the triple goddess, which some of you may know, which is the three moons, right?
Okay.
And we tattooed it on ourselves really young. I always call it like the mark of the goddess, and it really opened to me. And then I was 19 years old. A friend of mine, her mother gave me a book called The Spiral Dance, and The Spiral Dance was written by Starhawk, who is an elder in both the permaculture community as well as what's called the reclaiming community. She's in her 70s, and she wrote this book in 1973, I think, The Spiral Dance.
Oh,
And
that was the year I was born.
nice. And it was about the reawakening of the goddess and the neo-pagan religions. And I remember and it was the same time too when I was getting into herbalism. I was 19 years old, when I was introduced to a lot of these ideas. And then in university, I actually studied art history. And it's a lot of like symbolism and goddess imagery and
That's
all
true.
of that. Yeah. And I remember seeing and learning about when the church, I think it was like 700 or something like that, they declared Mary Theotokos, which means mother of God. And I remember sitting there in class and like, mother of God. Oh, it's the goddess, and having this big awakening, like, well, who is she?
Yeah.
And it just took me down a lot of different rabbit holes, and in both like exploring my spirituality and practice and reading our histories, especially like the history of femicide and the histories of oppression, religious oppression, and the histories of herbalists as well. Because when you do learn about herbalism, you also realize that there was midwives and herbalists were severely oppressed, specifically women. And I talk about this in the Being Witch
Yeah.
series. We're going into the history of like, well, what happened to us?
Yeah.
Whole cities, committing femicide and not even having women anymore in their towns because of this like fear of the feminine and this fear of their freedom, and so they might not even have identified as witch or been practicing, but it was definitely the idea of witchcraft rising right now is and this identity for people coming back is it's the goddess speaking through, and it's her trying to bring safety and power and solidarity back to the feminine in particular. And it's not just again about women, it's also for men, because a lot of men also are very called to this and feel very much the pull of goddess, the pull of nature, the pull to
Yeah.
deconstruct these systems that have been layered upon us that really are
Right.
not helping us always, to really be free in all the ways that it means to be free.
Yeah, getting back in balance. It's just
Mhm.
warms my heart. Well, I'd love to play a clip from your course on Stream Plus, Being Witch. Can we play that first clip?
Mhm. When we go into these more like modern situations, we see that witchcraft and the idea of the witch is still very prevalent. From Polynesia to Asia to Africa to South America to Central America, there are a lot of cultural beliefs around witches. And we know that the witch is usually seen as something bad or malefic. And this is quite often what we're looking to reclaim and looking to change as we move throughout this talk together and as we move throughout our lives together and as we, take on these new identities. When we come into modern times, we're going to take us back 500 years, and we're going to go back 500 years to the very pre-Renaissance, post-Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, and again, right now we're going to zoom into a very Eurocentric context, because again, I think it is important for people to understand and to see some of the statistics of what happened. And where this is mostly documented is through this Witch Craze book, is where I've pulled these numbers from. And she specifically is writing about what, again, has been documented. So we don't know about lynchings. We don't know about people who were not set before trials.
Yes. So it's really horrifying, actually, thinking about how persecuted the female race was. I mean, do you feel that some women may have been persecuted in past lives or through their lineage and hold that trauma?
Oh, absolutely. We call that the witch wound,
The
right?
witch.
So a lot of, I actually believe that a lot of thyroid issues come from that. And of course, the thyroid is highly sensitive to all kinds of environmental toxins. So not always, but a lot of women were strangled before they were burned, or they were strangled before they were tossed into the water. And that strangulation here around the voice thinking about the throat chakra, and the inability to use our words or using them in ways that are harmful to ourselves and others. I think that that's one of the witch wounds. I think that certain women also, in carrying that, might not even know, of course, what it is. Or like what's coming up for them. Like, why are they afraid of water, or why are they just naturally nervous around men in power? Because that's what it was a lot of times, was that these women would be faced before a court of men who were just looking to hurt them. And there's a lot of sexual exploitation where they would come up with all these different like torture devices to harm the female body, from red hot speculums to cutting off of the breasts to it was horrible, what women were subjected to over this period of time. And so I absolutely believe that it is present in us now. It wasn't that many generations ago. And for people, I guess it depends on if and what your belief in reincarnation is, if it exists and how it exists and how it happens. But it also, I think that's also why there's so many women associated right now. And maybe it is time when we feel safe. Maybe it's time now to try to work through healing. And that's why these women are coming back with strong voices and strong feelings, and the ability to speak right now where they couldn't before. I think also that our bloodlines are really powerful, and our bloodlines, especially for people of European descent from places like France and Germany, that's where the majority of these atrocities happened. Like Spain and Portugal and Scotland, they participated. Ireland got out. Italy also did not have very many witch trials, which is kind of crazy when you think that it was the seat of the Pope there. But Italian Strategia is still, or Italian witchcraft is still very strong. It never went away. Same thing in Greece, it never really went away, like the wise woman traditions. Same thing in Ireland, the wise woman traditions never really went away. But specifically, like Austria, Switzerland, France, and Germany. So for people who have maybe those ancestral bloodlines, you probably had women who were harmed, in your bloodline somewhere, because the majority of the population was under threat, for about 500 years, from the 1300s, really 1200s. It started medieval time, but it got really bad into certain age, like the Renaissance times, which is crazy because it's also like the rise of humanism and these amazing artists like Da Vinci, and we saw the goddess coming back into art. And at the same time, it was the exploration of the Americas, and the indigenous Holocaust began, especially like the Spanish and with the Portuguese, with the Inquisitions, they were with a lot of targeting and harming of Jewish populations in Portuguese and Spain, with the Inquisition in particular, also with the witch trials. So it was a very dark time in human consciousness, where they were participating in this harm of human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely do think so. I had a memory come through where I could feel it in my body, and also had a thyroid issue, and a very a lot of different neck types of things. And it was actually sitting with ayahuasca, where I relived being tortured as a witch twice on the rack. And during that time, in that journey, I had other women in the circle with me, and I remember I didn't tell anybody. I relived all the pain, and I remember a few days after, I was having a really hard time integrating back into my body, and I was feeling very fractaled, and I was really having a hard time. And one of my girlfriends, who was in the circle with me, in the ceremony with me, I hadn't say anything to her about what happened. Go see her because she was a body worker, and really a potent little witch herself, and because she's a lot shorter than me. But I remember I saw her, I approached her place, And she looked at me, she goes, I was in the tower with you. And I never said anything to her. She saw it happening during that ceremony and was present with me reliving it, and it was really, really intense. And it was actually that experience which helped me to come out of the broom closet and actually feel safe to like start talking about things and to identify and be like, I can't let these women die again, because it's also what Starhawk says. Is Starhawk says that to not acknowledge what happened is to kill them over and over and over.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I'd like to play another clip from your course on Stream Plus, clip number 2, where you talk about modern stereotypes.
Thank you. Yeah, the sexuality for me and the sexualization of witches, and even around like Halloween time, we see it so much, like the sexy witch costume or the ugly witch costume. It's like the witch just can't be like a regular woman. We have to like stereotype it or put it into a specific box on what we think it's going to look like. So often we see, a lot of capitalizing with witchcraft as well, and especially as the identity of witch is becoming so much more popular, which I again really love. I think it's really important for witchcraft to become popular and the identity of witch to be popular, so more people can feel safe identifying as it. But it also gets diluted in many ways, and it gets diluted through capitalism. And capitalism, if some of you have studied with me social permaculture, you know that I don't believe capitalism is bad. I believe that exploitive, extractionist capitalism is dangerous and evil, frankly. It causes so much harm to ecosystems and to humans, and to animals and to plants and to fungi, everything, water, soil, the air, all of it. And so capitalism, in the exploitive form of capitalism, we see a lot of like cheap goods also coming out, trying to hook people into buying this stuff so women or men or whoever can, it is very targeted towards women, will buy merchandise to help them exemplify who they are in the world as witch. And so we see a lot of merch and a lot of fast fashion, whether it's with moons on it or other witchy paraphernalia with like pentagrams, or the consumer culture of looking a certain way with whatever tights or style or swag that you might need, the crystals or another pendulum or another thing, that's very present there. I'm finding in the modern witch culture is capitalization of who we are.
Well, it's interesting because, with the popularity of Wicked, in the movie, I mean, I was going to ask, are these stereotypes improving? And I feel like no.
It's funny. I love the Wicked book. I just reread it. I did want to see the movie, and I was actually really disappointed at the movie because they don't actually go into what an activist she is and how defiant she really is against, the wizard or this tyrannical
right.
power.
It's very small. Yeah.
It's very small, and it's very like kitschy, and very I don't know if it's Disney or Pixar or whoever put it together, but it's very much through, that selling of, how many, now Wicked 2 and Wicked 3 and Wicked 4 and all that, the branch offs of the story. And I really did like the movie in a way. But I
did too.
But I was like, but what about this side of her story and this side of her story? So
it was missing a depth.
It was missing a depth. And I really hope they get into that, because I think that that's actually the most powerful part of the Wicked story, you know. And for those of you who haven't read it, it's so good. It's really one of my favorite books. And she's such a powerful character and heroine, and you just really like feel her angst and her passion and her love and why women get demonized, you
Yeah.
know, and the
And I
toxic
felt it a little
masculinity.
bit in the movie, but I can imagine it's even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could have done better. And I understand that they were trying to like, you know, speak to children, but also at the same time, like there's a lot that children really can understand if the story's told well.
Mhm.
So yeah, but you know, but it at the same time, what it does is now there's all the paraphernalia out there, cups and
Yes.
pens and lunch boxes and all this like stuff that it's just it perpetuate or whatever children buy now that just like perpetuates consumerism, you know, and tries to fill the void of expression. And it becomes actually kind of like, okay, I'm expressing myself this way, but it's not always very unique anymore, right? It's like a monoculturing even of expression.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, would you share about your talent in tarot readings?
Sure. Thank you for that. So, stay tuned, everybody, with Humanities Stream, because I have a new class coming out I'm really proud of. It's called Tarot Explorations. It's actually 13 plus one, because the very first class is like an introduction to the history of the
Oh,
tarot.
great. I'm so excited,
Yeah.
actually.
Oh, it's so good. But you know, my one of my tools of my spirituality is through the tarot. And I told you I studied art history and I really move through the world. I really love symbolism and metaphor, and I'm constantly thinking that way. I write that way. I learn that way really well. And it actually plays into herbalism with the idea of correspondences and pattern recognition. I think that skill is very much refined in me because of my studies in art. But you know, with the tarot, it's I just love it. I love storytelling. I love how it's considered the perennial philosophy. It plays into the hermetic beliefs of the strength of the imagination and the animistic world, and that, you know, we're really looking to archetypes. And archetypes are these universal truths that we see throughout the human existence. And it really doesn't matter which culture you come from, you find very similar ones. So it's the lovers or the high priest or death or the sun, the moon, the stars, or justice and these natural law, you know, the wheel. It's like there's so many beautiful presentations of this perennial philosophy that shows up for humankind. And so this class, you know, that I'm doing tarot explorations is that I go into the history and where the tarot comes from and who influenced it and how it became to be what it is today in the system as we know it. But then I also really go deep into the archetypes of the major arcana. We look to correspondences from the minor or the four suits into the fifth suit. And then I help people learn how to read. And so you don't always have to pick up the book. It's like we're looking at body posture, we're looking at color, we're looking at different symbols, we're looking at the environment that people are in. Every class has a sample spread for you to learn and to practice with. And so it's a very in-depth class. It's definitely like a pause, practice, take notes, think. But it's for anybody to, you know, pick up any tarot and be able to read it. I also started reading the tarot when I was 19. A lot of things opened to me. So I've had 25 years now also reading. And most of it was for myself. And but also when it was for myself, what I would do with all my classes, like my permaculture classes in particular, I'd have like, you know, 17 to like 25 students. I'd put out a sign up sheet and I would read everybody's cards for them, because that was really how you learn, you know, is when you take yourself out of it and just open up the channel to telling story from what you see and how you're connecting. And now I actually, it's something I've transformed into also doing professionally, which is amazing. You know, I probably do 2 to 6 readings a week for people, you know, and they're anywhere from 60 minutes to 2 hours. And,
Oh,
you know,
wow. That's
yeah, and
comprehensive.
very. And, you know, the tarot is not fortune telling. The tarot is helping you to understand energetics of situations,
I
right? Like
see.
Yeah, like how are we uh, dealing with certain, it's relating, right? Like how we relate to each other, to our human experience, to our place, to our stuff, to our work, to just bring clarity. You know, a lot of it, it's things that you know that you might know not know how to articulate, or that you need some help giving attention to, for example. So I feel that the tarot is just like an amazing tool for personal development and really helping people to make decisions that feel right for them, that aren't just like intellectually like I should be doing this, you know, but really like going deep into the heart's desire and trusting intuition and paying attention to dynamics, you know, that are happening with you and with others, and your relationship with your mind. It's very deep, and I'm a storyteller in that way. Like I love myth, I love fairy tales, I love archetypal psychology, I study astrology, and so I bring lots of different, you know, ways to express the cards. Um, and yeah, I absolutely love it. So I'm really excited for it to come out, you know, for Humanity Stream, and see what Stream Plus, and see what you all think about it. And I hope that you really enjoy it. So
Oh, thank you so much.
mm.
Thank you for sharing all of your wisdom with us. Have you ever heard of, or do you use Sabian symbols in your work?
Yeah, thank you for that. I don't
Yeah. Okay.
actually.
Yeah.
I do know about them, but
Yeah, they're not that common,
they're not that common.
So
Oh.
I was just curious because I know someone that incorporates that. So I was
Mm.
just curious. Beautiful.
It's another one to dive into, but I still have hopefully a long life before me to keep learning.
Yeah,
Learning.
to keep learning. I had a question because we have an eclipse coming up. So
Mhm.
do you have
True.
any recommendations for ritual or practice that can help us be our best selves?
That's so nice. Well, you know, eclipses, they can be considered portal energy, you know, whether it's like lunar or solar. It's like you think there's two coming into alignment. So sun and moon coming into alignment. When I look at that actually through perhaps symbolism, the tarot, right? It's like the sun and the moon reflect off each other. The darker the moon, right? The darker it is outside, the more we're actually to see internally. The
Mm,
brighter it is outside, the more illusion it's actually present. So then when something comes in front of the dark of the moon, it's like there's illumination and this ability to see and this illusion. We're not quite sure what we're seeing. And now it's an ability to trust intuition because that dark comes over the illumination again. And so I think what's important with eclipse times is, yeah, they're definitely not decision making times, because there is a form of illusion and uncertainty that's present. But what's really important with eclipse times is just to trust your feelings as they're moving through you, and to get out of your head. You know, it's so easy as modern humans to really just get, and I get really heady too. You know, but really like just try to feel into your body what's happening with eclipse time, and don't see them as a negative omen. You know, they're not scary times. It's just, it's a different form of reflection. It's like shadows reflected back at itself in this
hmm
case. The light of the moon now is having to be present with the sun coming in front of it, you know, reflecting at it and blocking it out at the same time. So it's a really good time to journal and explore your ego trips a little bit, assumptions on yourself, you know, all the different stories that you tell about yourself. And so it's nice maybe to sit with something like a candle, you know, and like almost create an eclipse like energy where it's like in the meditation of staring at the candle, but then actually closing the eye and seeing the light behind the eyes. It would be
mm
almost like an eclipse energy that you're bringing forth into your own physical experience. And what is, you know, like what is luminosity and shadow for you? Like what is it to, you know, that you maybe you're hiding, or that you're ashamed of, that you would love to be able to share, or that you're feeling nervous of to share with the world, you know, or to share with yourself, or to share with your lover, to your friends, or whoever it is, you know, because it is, there's an uncovering that can also happen, you know, with eclipse time.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you for that advice.
You're
So
welcome.
wise. Well, thank you for joining me here today, Sarah. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for Being Witch in Modern Times with Sarah Wu. Her courses, Being Witch, Regenerative Herbalism Foundations, which is an incredible course, Tarot Explorations and Plants of the Craft are available on the Stream Plus platform. So join Stream Plus now and gain immediate access to these incredible programs, as well as hundreds of other spiritual teachers and programs. We're proud to say that Humanities Stream Plus is the largest global streaming platform for consciousness raising masterclasses and transformational education. We are a nonprofit and also give back with our One for One program. I wanted to thank Steve Farrell, Dee Meyer, and the production team, Jim Gray, Garth Catterall, Andy Gutsky, Karen Weissert, Nanette Kennedy, and the rest of Humanities team, and especially you, Sarah. Many blessings to
Thank
you.
you. Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Take care. Thank you, Charissa.